Good morning. So the Soloshot 3, it does work. I initially had a lot of frustrating trial and error, hit and miss recording sessions with it, like really low success rate. And then um, over time, I learned how to operate the Soloshot 3. I learned that the two big things, which are one, the proper calibration procedure. When I did that right, I had 100% success rate combined with the other big thing, which is knowing what causes interference and eliminating that. So one of the big ones is metal. I one session I changed it. I chained it to a big metal like guardrail railing along the cliff, and that session I got absolutely the worst tracking yet, and it didn't follow me out to the beach at all. It just focused on some flowers and cliffs for 2 hours, and that's all I got. And so that is one of the big ones, metal. So big metal objects, like the big toilets that are at the beach, or a big rail, or cars. And that was the other thing. Like at first I would put it on top of my car, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. I couldn't figure it out, and so that's metal there too. But also, and my understanding of why metal is because it operates, the Soloshot operates on magnetic north, like a compass. And so if there's a big hunk of metal in the way, it can interfere with its being able to determine that. That's how I understand that. And then the other thing is signals from like cell phones, and cars nowadays have GPS and all these other signals. And so keep it away from parking lots and roads. And but even there, I've had, like, sometimes I've had it near a car, near a road, a busy road, and it still works. And so it's like, it's like, try it. And if you're having problems and you're near cars, near roads, move it 50 feet or so away from the cars and the roads and see if that improves the tracking. So that's the other one. And then the big one, the one that was driving me crazy and I couldn't make any sense of it, is elevation and how to. So a lot of times I will be at a beach where I'll have to put the Soloshot on top of a cliff or on top of a dune, both because either there is no beach to set it on, or just because the waves are big enough that if I put it directly on the beach, the wave height would block out me, and it'd be pointless. Like the Soloshot couldn't see me through the wave, and so it wouldn't record anything anyway. And so that was the big thing. And then there's a very specific calibration procedure that I didn't read correctly. And so it's essentially what it is take the Soloshot base down to the beach, turn it on, and it'll power up, it'll go through its thing, and then it'll say initializing sensors. And then after it does that, it'll go to the main screen, the main menu. And so after that point, then I can take this and move it anywhere or wherever I'm going to set it up, usually, on top of the cliff, on top of the dune, wherever it is. And then after I do that, then run the calibration procedure and leave it where it is. And then it will calibrate and track and lock on correctly. I have tried it where I initialized the sensors at the beach, calibrated at the water level, run the calibration there on the water, and then moved it up high, and it would recalibrate on its own, and then it would track me almost 100% of the time there, except when I used multiple tags. And so, like, I would wear one tag, and my buddy would wear one tag, and that's when I learned the correct procedure for calibration, which is. And again, this is relative to this current firmware. It's possible that in the future, when Soloshot issues a new firmware release, that the calibration might change. So if you're having issues or it's giving you problems, contact Soloshot support and ask them what the procedure is for your firmware. And if you're using an old firmware and having a lot of problems, I have upgraded the firmware every time there's a new one, and it's improved the performance every time. So I keep doing that. I upgrade. So there used to be this fear that if you have it working, don't mess with it, don't upgrade. Why risk it? But I found that with the firmware updates, tracking and performance has improved, so I keep doing that. And so, again, with multiple tags, the correct procedure that I was told and that works for me is to go down. So first I'll turn on one tag, just power it up, let it warm up, and it takes a while to acquire a GPS signal. So like if I go to the beach, when I'm like 15 minutes out from paddling out, I'll turn this on, set it on like the hood of my car or something, or where, board or whatever, and I'll suit up and do all that, and then I'll take both the tag and the Soloshot down to the water, near the water at sea level, and I'll turn on the base. It'll power up. The sensors were initialized, and then if I'm going to leave it there, I will take one tag, put it about 30 feet to 50 feet away. I'll put it on top of my board or paddle, whatever, and then I'll go back to the base and I'll push the track and let it calibrate. And so it runs through the calibration procedure, spins around, and then it'll generate a live preview and it'll start filming, and I'll be able to see whether it's centered or not. And usually it is, except when I move it up to elevation, it often, so I'll initialize at the beach, go up to the top of the cliff or the dune, I'll run the calibration, and often the camera will be pointing down, which seems like, oh man, it's not going to work. But what it's doing is it's at least it seems like what it's doing is pointing at the correct elevation. So when I then take the tag and I walk down the cliff or the dune to sea level, it'll be pointing right at me and it'll acquire me and it'll track me for the whole session. And so if it's doing that pointing down after you run the calibration, it's okay. It's usually going to work. And in my case, it works every single time. And then for two tags or multiple tags, so I power it on one, initialize, do the calibration, and then after it's calibrated and it's filming and it's ready to go, then I turn on the second tag, and then the base will automatically see the tag. And usually the second tag, it takes a while for it to acquire GPS, so it won't initially start tracking. And there'll be an indicator on here whether or not it has GPS, and it'll say on the base, poor GPS. And so I just basically ignore that, knowing that it's eventually going to resolve itself, find the signal. And so I just paddle out, give the other tag to my friend, and then we surf and it works. And then, so for multiple tags, it's kind of tricky. There are settings in there to tell it how you want the Soloshot to track the multiple tags. There's like fastest, meaning whichever tag is moving the fastest, it'll switch to that tag. There's closest, whichever tag is closest to the base, the Soloshot will switch to that tag and track that tag. And then there's button press. Press down once the plus sign of either tag, and whatever tag is pressed, the Soloshot will switch to that tag. And then if the other person presses the plus sign on their tag, it'll switch back to that tag, and it'll keep doing that for the entirety of the session. So I found that for surfing, that so far has been the best way to do it. The fastest, I thought that might work. Once the surfer paddles or catches a wave, he will be moving faster than someone who's not. But then I found that in testing it tends to get confused, or the delay is too long, and then it switched back. And so I found that button press is, for my application for surfing, is the best way to go. And so just before I'm paddling for a wave, or as I'm paddling for a wave, I'll press the thing. I'll press the plus sign, it'll switch to me, and then I'll surf whatever. And then same with my friend, they can, when they're paddling for a wave, same thing, they push the button press and it switches back to them. And so that works. There was the first two times I didn't do the calibration properly. And so it was not working. It was really frustrating. So I contacted support, and they gave me that detailed step-by-step thing. And as long as I calibrated that way, the third time when I did it right, it worked. And so now, so multiple tags, I've done it 3 times. The first 2, it didn't work at all. The third time I followed the instructions exactly to the T, and it worked. And so I'm pretty confident that it's going to continue working. I'm really glad to have the Soloshot in my toolkit, and it's yeah, it's right on. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps.